You know, my favorite thing in the world is when I do an interview that leaves me speechless, where it blows my mind like, did that really just happen? Did I hear what I think I heard? This is one of those interviews from an 80s new wave virtuoso and a true Renaissance man who was discovered by a legendary producer when he was busking on the street. He would go on to help revolutionize the future of music. He was the secret sauce behind huge 80s records by everybody from Def Leppard to Foreigner. And today he tells us about getting the call to play keyboards with David Bowie at Live Aid and how they rehearsed an exact set list and then Bowie changed the opening song seconds before they walked on the stage. Tremendous. We also hear how Michael Jackson invited him to his house right after he did Thriller and asked him to write him a song. There's so many cool stories in this. It's a can't miss on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you want the straight stories behind rock's legendary hits and the legends, make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the bell so that you always know when our latest interviews are dropping. We have some great ones coming out this year. Also, check out our exclusive content on Patreon. We actually have full interviews there. So I'm excited to bring you another episode from our series, Revelations. This is where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and albums. Today's episode is just tremendous. We get the story behind an 80s hit that we've all heard, but somehow we can't place it. It's been used a lot lately in pop culture, from Breaking Bad to Grand Theft Auto Vice City. It was actually written for Michael Jackson by new wave virtuoso Thomas Dolby. Thomas Dolby was discovered by mega producer Mutt Lange while he was busking on the street. He was brought in to put some synth muscle behind the huge hits, Waiting for a Girl Like You and Urgent for Foreigner in the 80s. Yeah, both of those iconic parts are from Dolby. Coming up next in an exclusive interview, Thomas Dolby gives us the unique history of his incredible career, from being Mutt Lange's secret weapon to getting chosen, handpicked by David Bowie to play his set at Live Aid. Mr. Dolby gives us some incredible insight into David Bowie as a regular person and how Thomas had to really pull out a miracle when Bowie changed the set list in front of millions of people. And then what it was like playing Heroes at arguably the greatest music gig in history.
And the synthesizers and keyboards, the very brilliant Thomas Dolby.
As we go into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zen AI, where the glasses I jam every single day. One of the best things about these glasses is when you go to Zenni.com, you can customize your eyewear with a prescription lens or non-prescription lens. You know, if you just want a cool look or a certain color or a particular style of lens, you can do that. And you order it, you put in your prescription, they send them right to you. Check it out today. Here's the story. Well, your second album, The Flat Earth, always love Hyperactive. It's actually probably my favorite song that you've done.
I was hooked to a machine just to keep my mouth from spouting.
And it was initially composed for Michael Jackson. Tell us about that, because you met him in 1982.
Yes, I met him in 82 actually when I was editing the She Blind Me with Science video. He was in the, in the control room down the corridor doing Billie Jean. And this is in Soho, London, and we got talking a little bit, and he'd actually heard my song in being played in clubs in the US. He thought I was American, but we got talking, and I took his number, and a couple of months after that, I flew to Los Angeles, and I was really sick. I had terrible mono, and there's like a torrential rainstorm going on in Los Angeles, and I was taken to this live TV stage. And I had to mime to She Blind Me with Science. It was all going horribly wrong. They had the 12-inch version of the song, which has the verses back to front. And I hadn't listened to that since the night that I mixed it about 5 in the morning. So I was getting, all the kids knew this version of the song, and I was getting the words wrong. It's really embarrassing. And afterwards, my entourage, from the record company flooded around me. And they had the whole evening, figured out for me and stuff. And I said, I'm going to see a friend tonight. And they said, oh, here, want to use the phone and we can drop you off. The limo can drop you off. So I called the only number I had in Los Angeles, which was Michael Jackson. And amazingly, he answered. He said, where are you? And I said, where are we? And I said, we're in the valley, apparently. He said, well, that's where I am. Why don't you come over? So he gave me the address. And this fleet of limos in this torrential rainstorm, they dropped me off like at the end of this drive on Havenhurst. And I said, I'll walk from here. I didn't want to show up with a big, fleet of limos. Little did I know, it's like a quarter of a mile, off the boulevard to get to his house. So I get there, I'm like completely drenched. And he answered the door and I looked like something the cat had dragged in. And then so I'm dripping there in his hallway. And his hallway is fantastic, sort of Busby Berkeley style, double staircases and art treasures like solid gold clocks and, ivory chess sets and a Darth Vader helmet and a big throne in the middle of it that looked like it was designed for Henry VIII. And Michael sort of like has to climb up to get into this throne and sit there. And he gave me an ottoman. So I'm sitting there talking to him, squatting on this ottoman. And we actually found we had a lot in common. We talk about music, we talk about production styles. He wondered about my Fairlight versus his Synclavier. We both traveled a lot as kids, it was really great. It was a really great meeting. And he said at the end of it, by the way, you got any demos or anything like that? Because he was about to start working on an album with his brothers, the Victory album. This is sort of his payback after Thriller, was that he was going to make an album with the brothers. And it was going badly, apparently. They were all arguing about songwriting credits and things. And I said, yeah, sure, I've got stuff, sort of the cogs are ticking over. And I was on tour and I got in the tour bus and we headed out across the desert. We had a gig in like Reno or somewhere. And I in the back of the tour bus, I came up with this groove with like a little Roland battery synth and drum machine. And I think I sort of started with the melody, I thought back to songs like ABC, that sort of period of Michael's thing, and I could imagine his voice singing this. And I sang it. I actually pulled over at a phone box and I sang it to him over a payphone. Before I sent him the demo. I sent him the demo and, I didn't hear anything for a few weeks. And finally I called up. I said, what did you think? And he said, I like the drum part. I'm burning up with the vision in my brain. And the drum part was sort of coincidental. It was really about the melody. It was all about how it would sound sung in Michael's voice. And that was the sum total of his reaction to it, was he liked the drum part. So that was that, basically. I couldn't really re-engage him about writing anything else because he wanted me to go to North Wales and get some ragwort for his llamas. And it became all about, could I get some ragwort for his llamas? So that was basically the end of the Michael Jackson relationship.
Amazing.
So I did it myself. I thought, okay, it's a shame. It's too good a song to go to waste. So I did it myself.
And the music in my veins and the dirty rhythm in my...
Well, it was your biggest hit in the UK.
It was indeed, yeah.
I love the opening.
It was interesting because a couple of sound engineers or producers told me that the beginning of that song was a disaster. And the reason is that it starts with these two big crash chords, blah, blah, and then to an acoustic guitar. And they all said, well, in radio, they're going to calibrate the volume that they play your song at based on the opening of the song. So you don't want to start with a crash because then the meters are going to be reduced and it'll be calibrated. So the effect of it when you hear it on the radio is you hear that crash and then it goes very, very quiet. And in comes this deep voice of the psychiatrist going, tell me about your childhood.
Tell me about your childhood.
And it was a very memorable and very different kind of an opening. So it works really well on the radio.
How did that come about? How did you decide to put that voice in there? Because it's an incredible voice.
She was a solo artist, and I'd produced a song for her for a New York label whose name I've forgotten, called Build Me a Bridge. And she was in the UK when we were recording that song. And she had a great voice for that, and I sort of, that part, I just really visualized it as somebody else singing it. And I mean, interestingly, in the music video, I do this thing with a puppet version of myself. And this street myth emerged that was actually my own voice that I had somehow transposed up to that octave. But no, it was Adele.
Well, songs presented as autobiographical, was it?
It was somewhat autobiographical, I mean, I think my family can attest that I had my hyperactive moments. I mean, my youngest son actually matches that profile a lot more closely than I did, I think. But I had my moments.
I want to ask you about Live Aid because it was such a pivotal moment in that decade where it all came together, using music as a way to inspire, to heal, or to help people who are less fortunate.
Just for one day.
Bob Geldof starting it off, and of course with Band-Aid and We Are the World followed suit, and so many things that happened all over the world.
God is there instead of you. We are the world.
But Live Aid was like the genesis of the whole thing coming together, where it felt like we were all kind of part of the same human family in one event. And you got to play with Bowie. Wow. Tell us about that, how that came about and your Live Aid experience.
I think probably if you interview musicians, English musicians from my generation, 8 or 9 out of 10 of them will tell you that David Bowie is the biggest influence. When we were growing up, because everything that he did musically, visually, fashion-wise, messing with gender, was just like so completely mind-blowing, during that period. And it bridged all the changes, the changes that happened in music, like progressive music to punk rock to, glitter and all the rest of it, to indie stuff. He bridged all of that. And, just seemed to be unthinkable in terms of like just an endless fountain of ideas. And he had this sort of godlike, sort of atmosphere around him. And when Live Aid first was coming about in that summer, I don't think anybody, well, of course, nobody had an idea, how pivotal it was going to be and what a large global audience it would have, whether it would be successful. And Bob Geldof asked Bowie to do it. He asked sort of all of the top British rock, aristocracy to do it. And Bowie's touring band were not together at that point. He wasn't touring during that time. He was actually making a movie. He was making Labyrinth.
Magic dance, magic dance, magic dance, magic dance.
And so all his players, like Carlos Alomar and Earl Slick and people, were off doing other tours or albums or whatever. He was in England and he had like 10 days to get a band together. He had recently made Absolute Beginners, which he acted in and wrote some songs for. And he used 2 of my musicians, Kevin Armstrong and Matthew Seligman, on guitar and bass on that song. So he went to them and said, can you guys help me put a band together? And they said, well, you should really talk to Thomas because he's being a producer. He knows all of the sidemen in London and so on. And so they brought me in and I brought in Neil from Prefab Sprout and, the various other musicians. And we had 4 evenings to rehearse the gig with Bowie. And he kept changing his mind about what songs to do. At the beginning, he was like, I'm going to promote my current single, which I think was Loving the Alien, probably not one of the most memorable.
Loving the alien.
But as he got more sort of zoomed in to what it was going to be, he realized, I got to play the anthems. I've got to get the stadium rocking with songs that they know and love. So it was only actually on the fourth day of 4 rehearsals that he settled on the final song list of those 4 songs. And he hadn't decided on the order, so we had the songs. We never played them back to back. We could get them sounding decent if we played them through a few times, but we'd never done a gig back to back. So, on the day, it's just the whole of London was basically ground to a halt for Live Aid, and you couldn't drive anywhere. So I was told that I was going to fly with Bowie in a helicopter to Wembley Stadium. And Bowie, you may recall, was terrified of flying.
Right.
And, until relatively recently, he always took the Queen Mary across the Atlantic because he didn't like to fly. So he was going to have to fly from Battersea Heliport in central London out to Wembley Stadium. And whereas through rehearsal, he'd been like really genial, very complimentary, let us figure out our own parts. And he was just, he glowed like the sun, and was inspiring this younger generation of musicians who all adulated him. We get in the helicopter and he's like chain smoking. He's rude to the pilot. He's being a complete diva. And the whole helicopter ride took about 10 minutes. And I had a Brownie camera, and years later, I pulled out the film with this Brownie camera. It's got some interesting, I didn't shoot enough, but it's got some interesting shots on it. But as we came into Wembley Stadium, we had this view of Wembley Stadium packed with people, the Twin Towers and everything. And years later, when they made the Queen film, Bohemian Rhapsody, they used CGI to create this drone shot coming into Wembley Stadium. And it's like, that was my view. Except with David Bowie in like framed in it, with the hat pulled down over his face, just chainsawing. Are we there yet? When do we get there? What time? For God's sake, where are we going to land? So that was an incredible experience. And we landed like in the parking lot in the end. And about 3 minutes later, we were standing at the side of the stage watching Bob Geldof like giving, a fundraising speech about to announce Bowie. And he turned to me. We'd been planning to start with Rebel Rebel. Turned to me and he said, TVC 15. And it starts with a honky-tonk piano solo. Like of the many styles that I can, that I can program, live honky-tonk piano is like boogie woogie piano is not one of my things, right? So I had to start the gig off, like on solo piano, which is quite intimidating. But the whole experience, it was like we were wafted along on a cloud. And we got to Heroes by the end, which is actually, believe it or not, it sounds very simple, but it's actually an easy song to screw up because some of the verses have an extra few bars, or it's like you could make a real fool of yourself by hitting the riff at the wrong time.
I could be king.
But, I was on autopilot at that point. I'm staring at Bowie's back. He's in this gorgeous blue suit. He's got the crowd in the palm of his hand. I'm looking out there. It's like half of London is there with their just waving and enjoying the summer afternoon. And it was just a completely transcendental moment.
And you could be my queen.
To play Heroes in front of that many people at Live Aid, David Bowie, if that is all you had ever done in your life, that is a life worth having lived.
Well, that thought crossed my mind, believe it or not. I thought, okay, I could die happy at this point,
I just don't know how it gets better than that. We've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, and of course Freddie Mercury gave such a great performance there. But Heroes, Heroes is a song that's a song that probably half of mankind, if that was the last song they could ever hear, that would be fine with them. That would be the song they would choose. It's
true.
It's a song that just means more and more every year. And wow, that just gives me goosebumps. And I wasn't even there. Just hearing you describe it is just a monumental moment. And Live Aid, every time I talk to somebody about Live Aid, it's always just such an incredible experience to hear of what happened and their view, their point of view, seeing it through their eyes.
And I feel bad for the people that missed it. You know, I was just fortunate to be there, and you know, very proud to have that was a moment when I was able to contribute one little slice of 80s culture and the David Bowie legend.
Isn't that amazing? Thomas Dolby truly is the Renaissance man of our time. He's done so many things. Leave us a comment about this amazing song and about Thomas Dolby playing Live Aid in his 80s hit Hyperactive. What are your memories of this song? Do you remember this song? Gotta add it to your playlist if you don't. Let us know in the comments. If you dig our content, make sure to subscribe below so you never miss out on any videos. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.